Welcome everybody to Blerdlines. This is your man Cam. With me as always is
Cam Bigelow,
as well as
This is Josh, the WNBA OG.
aka Boss Body.
as well as
Professor Ozymandias today. Look, wow. Listen to my works and despair.
And we are
Okay.
and we are back talking about the X-Men 97, specifically animated cartoon. I think out of everyone has actually read up on comics up till recent, which is crazy. But we're gonna focus this one on X-Men 97 as a whole. Earlier on, we did the first 4 episodes, and then now all the episodes are out, all the hoopla, all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to kind of come back and just have a good conversation about X-Men 97, what we've seen, what we experienced, and then also what we think is going to happen in the future, because they already have season 2 plotted out and like half done already, I think, with the main showrunner Bo DeMaio, who got fired unceremoniously, but has popped back up in the socials to kind of give his 2 cents on what he was hoping to do with the series, some of the stuff that actually came out, but then also some of the parts that got left out. But overall, guys, what did you guys think of X-Men 97 as a whole, the series?
Josh, you should take this one first.
Oh, okay. I mean, as someone who it just clicked for me why you want me to go first. As someone who did not like, from day one, did not like the original 92 X-Men animated series. The writing was bad, the plotting was weird, the animation terrible. There was nothing good about it to me. As someone who hated that series, I was pleasantly shocked at how good X-Men 97 wound up being. Top to bottom, like from the first episode straight on through to the highly celebrated episode 5 to where it ended. I have nothing bad to say, which is I can't remember the last time I've said that about anything related to X-Men in media other than the comics.
Yep.
Borderline flawless. Like, it was really well thought out. It was incredibly well animated. Getting back the voice actors that you had, the little cameos, a Captain America cameo. It had pathos, it had ethos, it had emotion. There was a through line, beginning, middle, end to the season. Everything that you would want in a narrative showed up on this series in one season. There are live action shows that don't do what X-Men 97 did with what seemed like consummate ease. I cannot have asked for more, and that's saying a lot, because I asked a lot. I asked for a lot where X-Men is concerned.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think, like, I was surprised. One, it was the breakneck speed of the pacing was crazy in terms of the amount of stories they were like just rifling through, but at the same time making it all make sense, which was a dope thing. I think my main thing from the last original show was like, yeah, animation was shitty. The story was all over the place. Like, it just didn't make sense. Where this one, they took a lot of stories, some of them that were kind of convoluted, some of them that weren't, and they kind of just smashed them all together and to kind of make some type of a narrative that actually made sense. I like that this was not a Wolverine-centric story, which is a bad thing about X-Men for the last 25 years. I like that they utilized X-Men in a world that inhabits the rest of the heroes. So you saw a little glimpse of Captain America. You saw a little glimpse of Baron Zemo and Doctor Doom and other people that live on Earth were well aware that the X-Men are around. And I thought on that respect, they did a good job of world building with that. I'm also glad that they kind of just dropped you in as opposed to having to re-explain everything over again. I think that was cool. I was surprised. I was kind of curious about how they were going to do that, but just like, hey, these characters, and even if you don't, you get familiarized real quick. And I think that overall, like the way they used the villains and to make sure that there was actual consequences, which I thought was dope. Again, as a longtime X-Men like viewer, I've been reading X-Men for 35 plus years essentially. We all know no one ever stays dead, but I like that in this show they showed the actual consequences and then they showed the reaction to those consequences. So I thought that was really, really dope just in general of like they did a really good job of expanding the characters, telling a good narrative, world building, and then also just being like, yo, these are the X-Men. They actually are badasses, but they're in this world that's always constantly in chaos. So I thought they did a pretty good job.
I have a theory. I don't think Gambit is dead. I don't think he's going to stay dead.
Of course not. He's going to be a freaking Apocalypse Horseman. That was from one of the other stories.
Yep. That is
but
exactly.
That's what I mean. But like that, but those consequences are something that at least it plays out for the duration of the series, right?
Right.
That's my main. Like everyone, an X-Men, no one ever stays dead. We know this, but
yep.
At the very least, they allowed that to be a thing, an overarching arc. Like Gambit's death caused 3 other plot points to move forward, and they kept those plot points going all the way into the end, where you saw like those types of consequences, which is dope. So when he does reappear, you're like, oh shit. But then again, at the very least, he's gone enough that actually there's impact. His death actually means something, where a lot of time in X-Men stories, oh, Jean Grey's dead again? That's cool.
We'll see her again in a year. No big.
Yeah, exactly.
They actually leaned in a little bit because there was a little metafiction going on as well, where they constantly made comments on things that probably Bo DeMaio and the writers are, because they themselves are fans, have been annoyed over the years with, how the X-Men is depicted. The thing that comes to mind is when Rogue is asking how many people are going to have to die for the professor's dream to come true. And when she gets to Jean, she's like, been there, done that already, and came back or something like that.
Exactly.
And also we get that post the post credit scenes where Forge makes Bishop, when he comes to meet Forge after they think the X-Men are dead, he's like, we're gonna play that game where everybody thinks all the X-Men are dead, but we're actually about to go find them wherever they are, because they're likely not dead.
Yep.
So they definitely, because I agree with everything you guys said. I'm not gonna state how good the show is, because we've talked about that, but I think there was a turning point in this series that made you pay more attention. And Josh mentioned episode 5 called Remember It, which was written by DeMaio himself. This is the episode that is the ultimate turning point of a narrative, where they were going this direction and then something happens and it turns them completely in a whole nother way. It's like the moment when Ned Stark is beheaded, or, when, you can think of a lot of turning points in the story that really hooks you in. And the reason I bring that up is because I think, because the episode before that, the first 3 I really enjoyed. I did not enjoy Motendo Life Death Part 1, which was episode 4. I didn't like the Motendo thing. I just thought it felt like filler, which ultimately that's a little bit what it was. But Remember It is when they stake the claim of what this show is and what it's going to be going forward, and that this isn't an exercise in nostalgia, which is what I was afraid of at first. We talked about that on the podcast, where I wondered how were they going to differentiate and separate this show from just being another, hey guys, remember this from the early 90s and, the X-Men and rah. And the first 2 episodes didn't have a lot of, it had a lot of it, but it also had a lot to sink your teeth in to look forward to. When you get to episode 5, that's when you're like, okay, now we got some. Now we're excited. And that's when I was excited to watch week to week to week. I was there. When that show dropped, when that episode, when after episode 5, every Wednesday, I would not wait longer than a certain period before I watched the new episode, because that is when the real storytelling started to take place. That's when the turning point. That's when we got into Act 2, if you will, of this 10 episode narrative.
Yeah, and I think they did a good job of before getting to episode 5, they did an excellent job of sort of bridging the gap between the 92 series and this new iteration of the series. You got just enough of what was going on in 92 to sort of feel like you were still watching that, and then making the narrative a little bit more linear, crunching it down a little bit in certain spots, expanding it in others, and just getting you to a point where, like, all right, I know that this is definitely the same series with the same players. Impacts from the previous series are the same, but the storytelling sort of takes its own shape as they move along. And like by the time you get to episode 5, they're like, all right, we're done with 92. Let's go.
Yeah. And that was the good part, is that they quickly moved past the nostalgia, right?
Mm-hmm.
They establish it, they use it as a way to hook us in, to get the old people back, and also, so I think there's a reinvigoration of popularity of the X-Men after this, because this was a reminder for us who are of a certain age of what the X-Men can be when they're written well, and when they're when the story is not just following Wolverine and Rogue, or all about Jean Grey, and all, when it's an ensemble and it's about each character, that's when it's at its best. And the further we went, I think we talked about this off the podcast, but one of the best things in the animation is the creativity, the imagination in the fight sequences, and how the mutants use their powers. I think I was probably standing up the whole time when Wolverine is fighting the was it Sylvie? What's the reporter name? When she started,
Sylvie.
Yeah, and when he fights Sylvie, I just love that whole sequence when he's like, Hank, I gotta talk to you about your taste in women. And she blasts him, calls him a Neanderthal, and then it's the whole sequence of him falling out of the sky, not caring because he's Wolverine, and whatever damage will happen to him, he'll heal just like that. But the whole time, it's like he's just slicing and dicing and just ripping to shreds any opponent. Imagination. And name a sequence that compares to that in 20 years of Fox movies.
Agreed. 100% agreed. And they gave you enough. They gave you just enough. Like, Wolverine was there, but he wasn't, like Cam mentioned before, and like you just said, like, Wolverine isn't it isn't front and center. Like, he's not the star of the show, like he has been for the last 35 years or however long they've been shoveling him down people's throats. It worked, and that one episode was enough, right? It wasn't a whole season of Wolverine being up front. It was him being in the background, making snarky, smart ass quips, mostly at Scott's expense. He always did. And then
great. I love that.
when it's time, but when it's time to get down, that's the Wolverine I grew up with.
Yeah,
he's sitting in the back, smoking his cigar, drinking his beer, and when it's time to get down, that's the dude you call. And when he shows up like that.
And you saw that, and again, just one great moment to the next. Then you take that scene and you put it next to him and Nightcrawler going off on the whole time, and the visual, never keeping everything in harmony. When Wolverine stabs the Sentinel, and at the same time Nightcrawler is teleporting it away from Rogue, you see the whole thing from Wolverine's POV. that one moment, you don't get that at all in any other sequence because it's idiosyncratic to Wolverine and to Nightcrawler. Because Wolverine can handle something like that because, again, his molecules always just back.
Yeah, and I think they did a good job of making sure that one, you saw every character's powers in their full glory.
Yes.
You got the redeeming Cyclops situation when he was jumping out the plane. That was dope. You got the sword fighting part with Nightcrawler, seeing him stuff. You got Magneto freaking literally messing with the magnetic poles of the Earth.
Turns the magnetosphere into a giant EMP.
He was like, nah.
And shuts it down so that the Earth will ultimately die.
Yeah. And honestly, Magneto was right. Yeah, exactly. But I think and they took that from Ultimates. That was
and also that's a good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Cam. You say they took that from the Ultimates?
Yeah, the Ultimates storyline when they did that. And that was going to say that's the other thing that he did really well is they, like every episode, they smashed at least 3 to 4 storylines into one, but still having an overall arching narrative.
Yeah,
I would say, and they made it work. Exactly. And it was like, I think if my only quibble would be maybe it was a little too fast because some of those had some interesting meat that they could have done some stuff with. But at the same time, they did it for a cartoon and for what they're, the time frames that they have, they were zooming through. It was entertaining. And
they didn't blast
through that later either.
Yeah.
So they didn't blast through as quickly as Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
True.
Earth's Mightiest Heroes was just if it might have been a little too fast. I think they scaled it down. They took the same formula, but they scaled it down just enough to keep similar pacing, but without wasting any like D'Angelo was saying, there are a couple of things that and you were saying just now, there are a couple of things that you wish they kind of sat on a little bit and let marinate a little bit more. But for the most part, it's been pretty solid pacing, and it moves at a pace that keeps your eyes glued to it. Like D'Angelo was saying, it's just enough. It's good enough. It's fast enough, good enough, and well written enough that every week you want to know what happened. You're locked in, and part of that is good use of that Earth's Mightiest Heroes pacing.
Yeah, and I think for the pacing, it was something that I noticed, but not for the same reasons that I think you guys are talking about, because those storylines are a tree fall in the forest if you haven't read them, right? You don't know which way is up, but the pacing itself, because it's so breakneck, it's so fast, that could be jarring, and it was early on because it felt like they were burning through a lot. And that probably would have been bad if it had not been serialized, because they made sure that you understood that we're picking things up after each episode leaves off. We're not just going from one topic to another, which was something that the animated series did. There was the original series did. Each episode was kind of standalone besides the small, through lines. Jubilee gets attacked by the Sentinels, and that's what leads her to the team. She actually references that in the first episode in the in this series. But yeah, I think overall it did everything that it should have done. It surprised me because I had very low expectations for it, just because I have low expectations, honestly, for a lot of everything that Marvel does. And I'm not trying to just be like an asshole to them, but they earned that low expectation for a little while. But this helped. This helped change that a bit, and in turn, at least for the animation and for the X-Men, because I think they're showing that there's at least Disney and Marvel are not going to be as dogmatic about what they're willing to do and how far they're willing to take these characters as I initially thought. And that's a good sign.
I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't going to watch, honestly.
Yeah, you guys, you, Josh, and Pope it took 5 episodes to convince me to even give this a shot. I was like, y'all giving this praise after 1 or 2 episodes. I was like, I'm not feeling that. And I'm not about to have me hoodwinked and bamboozled. And then you and Pope start hitting the group chat saying, yo, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so I'm going to hold y'all feet to the fire. I'm going to watch this, give it 5 episodes. And when that 5th episode came on, I was like, okay, we got something, we cooking, right? This whole X-Men 97 series, I'm going to just wrap this up real quick about, it reminded me of why I like them, and I didn't give 2 cents about the Avengers at that time. This reminded me of why the X-Men were so dope. The fact that they can kind of go through storylines from like the 92 through 97 run a little bit better is, I think, the accessibility to information to these storylines. Maybe you couldn't do that then. There was no comics historian back then, no comics explain, where you could just go online, listen for an hour about some dude giving you the full backstory of these stories. There's that element, but also the fact that we've already went through this pacing with the original X-Men, and they trimmed the fat, got to the meat and bones of it. They told a great story. They made really good, smart decisions on pacing, who's doing what. The Jubilee episode was kind of filler, but it didn't bother me, and they didn't give us the nostalgic factor. I also think that I like that Bo DeMaio addressed a lot of elephants in the room that probably couldn't get addressed back in that day. We all know the super service level, who's playing Malcolm X, who's Martin Luther King, but we also know being a mutant is like coming out to the world in real life. We also, they weren't afraid to say, yeah, Morph has a thing for Wolverine deeper in friendship. He was attracted to him. We also addressed that Magnus was a Holocaust survivor. You know, it was kind of loosely referenced.
That's always been kind of,
but they really stamped it and was like, yo, this is what it is. You see his number. They really put the stamp down there. And the fact that the one thing that I liked was when Scott said to Wolverine, and he addressed the elephant to the room when Wolverine was on quote unquote deathbed, he was like, don't break her heart. So he knows how much Jean Grey cares for Wolverine. I thought that was dope because I never really got that sense. It was just like, yo, you got the hots for my woman, but he understands the relationship and how much Logan means to Jean Grey. If he was to die, she might not be the same. I like that they put those type of stakes in there.
Yep.
Like that's what makes the X-Men appealing, because of those parallels to real life.
Yeah, those familial ties and those aspects of their humanity that supersedes the sort of trivial aspect of the storytelling. So, for example, like you said, Scott understands that Logan and Jean have something, but it's not romantic. They're not sleeping with each other. There's nothing like that. But he understands, he knows they know each other. So that comment was as much about the best way that Scott can say to Wolverine, I don't want you to die either. Like, I don't like you, but I also don't want you to die, because it's unspoken, but he's clearly important to Scott as well. Just as like Wolverine would probably never say this out loud, but Scott has an important place in his life as well. So when you see those little parts, those aspects, it makes the storytelling that much stronger. The little in between, the interaction between Rogue and Nightcrawler, where he talks about Mystique and you know, her not accepting him, and you know, and all of those things didn't come off as wasted dialogue when they're talking to each other in that way. You know, I loved Wolverine's constant dig at Scott, especially when he's talking about, when he asks Cable why he didn't do anything to stop Genosha, and Scott steps in and Wolverine's like, Daddy's home. It's just it was fun.
I also want to add on the fact that I like we get a little bit more of asshole Scott, kind of going away from the professor's ideals. I'm getting that sense.
I'm getting that too. I like it.
And I like the fact that in this world, the Avengers exist, and there's like a little beef between mutants and the Avengers. They don't get along. Like,
Liking that too.
so I like this. X-Men has given us a few options for conflict and storylines. We got the X-Men versus Avengers. We got the other villains that made cameo appearances that we can go into. We got the obviously elephant in the room with the ending with Apocalypse. So there's a lot of ways we can go this. And on the side note with Bo DeMaio, I like that he got on Twitter and gave us little nuggets and homework to like look, like when they got Scott and Jean got transported to the future. Bo DeMaio put a screenshot of the SS Enterprise. It was like, watch this episode. And the reason why was one of the actors from Star Trek voiced the character in that episode. And this is unbeknownst that I'm not a Star Trek fan, but I was like, oh, so each week he was giving us little clues and hints and affirmations. Oh yeah, they were just more than friends when Morph brought Wolverine a beer to like cheer him up. That was just he's showing his love and affection towards his partner, but also a deeper mutual understanding. He's like, I'm in love with this person, you know? So I was like, that's cool, you know what I'm saying? So I dug the outside of the X-Men things that I was getting. Obviously, I'm privy to social media, so I had accessibility to Bo DeMaio's thoughts and insights to each episodes, but I thought that was actually cool, you know? And it's a shame that he's a part of the second season, but he's not as heavily involved.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting how that plays out, because I mean, now that he's been doing more on the kind of the publicity tour and kind of just going out there and talking and whatnot, it's interesting to kind of hear some of the stories. It was like, because he was also involved in early talks of X-Men treatment for a screenplay for the movie. He was also in talks with doing stuff for Blade. So there's a lot of ideas that he was throwing around and pitching. Like he was pitching X-Men in some stories where he wanted to do more of a civil rights era type X-Men. So it was more ground level, fighting the man, that aspect of it. Of course, I got rejected, but but coming up with those types of ideas that would be different than the typical suits and capes that was going on. So I think that like X-Men did a good job of having a lot of nuggets, a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of stuff for the fans, but then also like Cam said, if you came in cold and all you really know of X-Men is the movies and the cartoon, and you watch this, you still got a good enjoyable experience. You got some interesting stories, you got some great characters, and then all of us X-Men nerds were like, oh, I remember that was from blah 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 blah, and this is this and that, and yada yada yada. So I thought they did a good job of kind of like checking all the boxes, and also just showed again that when Marvel wants to, they actually can create good shit. And so this was a good reminder of that. And now that they have all their properties back to where it is, now we get to see what they do with the fan favorite properties, because like Cam said, the Avengers were the C-level people. Like ain't nobody care about no Avengers for years until
growing up. It was all about, to me, X-Men, Spider-Man,
exactly.
Or the Punisher. Like those were like the Marvel. I didn't even know Blade was a Marvel character for a long time.
Yeah. So I think that now that they have all their properties back and they're starting to give it to the proper attention, it'll be really interesting to see that what they do with their favorites, because like Fantastic Four is like is their darling at the end of the day, and same thing with X-Men. So if they put this much effort into X-Men 97, again, that gives a little bit hope for things going forward, and I'm curious to see what they do with it, because now we're at a point where they've squandered away a lot of their goodwill, and Dr. Doom as well. They've squandered away a lot of their goodwill, and now that they're they're slowly earning it back. Not 100%, but they slowly earning it back.
They are. I wanted to say about Bo DeMaio. I don't really enjoy his social media activity because it feels like a lot of hand-holding. And I really would rather him until the story is done, and then he can do all that. But the commentary alongside the episodes, for me, it was unnecessary. But I can understand how people would be into that, and I guess it's a good thing in today's let's interact with social or whatever, but I don't need personally that assistance or whatever.
It worked and it worked.
I'm saying it worked. It didn't work for me. It probably worked.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Fair. No judgment. Yeah, that's fair. Because it didn't take away. It didn't take anything away from the storyline. It didn't give me any additional insight. It was like, oh, this person's associated or this, that. But he didn't need his commentary to get the full gist of it was just more of a cherry on top to see his commentary. But I totally can see where you're coming from, D, with that. So that's a fair assessment.
So now, to wrap it up, like, where do you guys hope they take it on the X-Men tip? No, we're gonna get a second season for X-Men 97, which is cool. It's already like that. I think that's a lot of the episodes have been written. It's in post-production now. So a lot of the visions that Bo DeMaio had for both seasons is going to be basically fleshed out. But now, with a little bit of renewed sensibility with X-Men, where do you guys where do you hope it goes?
I hope it goes to good writing. That's all.
Yeah,
that's it.
Like Kim pointed out a few minutes ago, it seems as though they're tilting a little bit towards militant Scott. And while I have many gripes about many of the different turns that X-Men has taken over the years, I gotta tell you, militant Scott was the most fun that I'd had seeing that character in action and reading X-Men in a really long time. Scott being on some list, it's about it. We tried to fit in. We tried to live alongside y'all. We tried to save y'all even when you hated us. None of that worked. So now it's about us. That version of Scott, that was it. First of all, it deaded the whole cop, this whole cop narrative that people have, the jokes about him, basically just being like beat cop. I like that sort of deaded that trend of him being viewed that way for a little while, and him being on the level of like a Magneto on some. Nah, we gonna do what we got to do. I don't. He basically all but was wearing a Magneto was right T-shirt for that stretch.
So it sounds like to me, and I agree with you, is that Scott Summers is having his Wayne Brady moment. If you know what you know what I mean, where this preconceived notion of who Wayne Brady is, but what he really is, based on the Chappelle skit, is this is what Scott Summers is like. Yo, I am starting to be not the quote unquote beat cop, straight edge. Professor X, man, we've been doing it your way. This ain't working. I think I'm gonna find my own path. He's becoming his own person in a sense and not living by the ideals of somebody else. And he's a little more cocky, dark, asshole Scott, which is cool. It's just a different Scott. And the fact that in the comics, he kind of leaves the X-Men and does this whole, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, he's on his own little team. But he's not like a villain or anything. It's just, he's following his own mantra. And he's just tired of following somebody else's code of ethics and trying to live a better life. Because there's a scene where Captain America and him are talking, and Captain is trying to say, we need you to do this. And he was like, and Scott basically was like, I got to do shit. And Captain America was like, well, this wasn't a request. I think you posted this. And Scott was like, I fully understood what you said. We ain't moving, basically. So I'm like, I'm kind of like, all right, bro. He feel like he is me when it comes to political shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not Democrat, Republican. I'm doing my own thing. That's just my take. And I kind of dig it. And this whole kind of, I don't want to say it's a rebranding because I'm not too familiar with all the comics where Scott Summers has done this, but I dig this from what I can tell, because the comics seems like they've established that Scott has kind of gone his own thing, but I'm not familiar with this territory, but I dig this new direction they're going.
Yeah, it's good because it kind of comes off of the when Jean Grey dies. And to Marvel's credit, Jean Grey was gone for a good 10, 11 years. Yeah, or something like that. So in that time, Scott got with White Queen. He was on his shit. Like, it was kind of dope because him untethered from Jean Grey let him be another character. And so that's when he got more militant. He's more on the Magneto side of things. and it was dope. I thought it was really. There's a couple dumb stories that they happened overall, but overall they allowed the character to grow out of the cookie cutter that it used to be for the longest time. And so bringing that putting those little dashes into the cartoon, I thought did a really good job. I really hope that they kind of like what Cam said, just there's so much story to pull from. You have literally 40, 50, 60 years of stories. So have fun, enjoy. There's good ones, there's bad ones, but there's so much to get inspired from that true fans can make it work. And that's what I think X-Men 97 was like. You have people that actually enjoyed X-Men writing X-Men. And just recently, the end of the Krakoa era, X-Men in the comics is about 4 years, something like that. But prior to that, there was a good 10-year stretch where there was not a good X-Men story. And the reason being was everyone that was writing X-Men did not want to write X-Men. And it was plain and you could tell. And so now in these last 4 to 5 years, you have people that actually are fans of the characters writing the characters. And it's fun, interesting stories.
I mean, I would say there were a few. It wasn't like it was completely bereft. Like that 10-year stretch was when Scott went militant. The
Legion story was good. Legion story was good.
Right. Legion story was good. The X-Men Schism was good
that was good.
2 seconds.
For 2 seconds. Yep. But yeah, you're right though. I think, the overall, I'm just glad that Marvel is slowly starting to redeem themselves. This is a nice step. This is not full, and we're not fully there. The next thing on their marker is Deadpool. Deadpool Wolverine situation, which is coming out soon. So that'll be another step to see if that wins people over or even redeems itself in that respect. They're having a lot of fun, from their marketing and everything else. So we'll see what happens. But I think this is a good step in the right direction of just being like, we can tell good stories that are engaging and have good world building, and we can keep moving from there. And on that, we're going to end it right there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we out. Peace.